Hey guys, Michael here with Team Hollow Hunters, and to start this video off, I want to apologize. I know we haven't been having any videos out here of late, and I sincerely apologize for that. We've just been so busy and our lives have been really hectic right now, but we are working on getting back into the swing of things and getting regular videos out to you. To start that off, I have an Ancient Gear deck profile. So for my deck, I'm running 3 Wyverns, simply because you need them. They're your main searcher for the deck. It's like Tin Can and Cosmos, except better. The only downside to this card is that you can't set cards for the rest of the turn, but that's easily avoidable. You just set everything beforehand. Next, I'm playing 3 Hunting Hound. This card is fantastic. In my opinion, if you're running a fusion build of this deck, it's a sin to play it anything less than 3. I have seen a lot of deck profiles playing it too, but you want to see this card as often as possible. It's your contact fusion for the deck. Its first effect is, when it's normal summoned, you can inflict 600 points of damage to your opponent. Its second effect, once per turn, you can fusion summon one Ancient Gear fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. It's fantastic. It's a walking polymerization mixed with a Gaga Cowboy. You summon it, burn, fusion. Especially if you go for a fusion into Howitzer, because then you burn your opponent for an extra 1,000. Next, I'm running a 1 Ancient Gear box to 2 Gear Gadget ratio. I've seen a lot of deck profiles have a 2 to 3 ratio for this, or a 2 to 2 ratio, but I find that I draw into box too often with that. So if I leave it at 1, that's wonderful. I can add it and then go for a Gear Gadget and then run for a new play. If I have a Hound on field, I can go right into Chaos Giant more often than not. Next, for my boss monsters, I'm running 1 Ancient Gear Golem and 2 Reactor Dragon. I've seen a lot of deck profiles run a 2 to 3 ratio or a 3 to 1 ratio for boss monsters, but in reality, I'd rather see these guys in my deck and rather have them there than consistently drawing them, because for the most part, if I'm using them for a fusion with Hound or Power Bond. So I have no real reason to, want to see them in my hand unless I'm really going out for something. And if I need them, I can always search them out with Wyvern, or I can special summon them with something like Catapult or Gear Town. Next, I'm running 2 gold gadget to 2 silver gadget. I like this because you see them just often enough that you can use them, but not too often that they clog up your deck. Finally, I'm running 1 Maxi, simply because this deck needs all the draw power it can get. At one point, I was running a 42 card deck profile for this, but I didn't like it as much and it wasn't as consistent. Next, onto the spells. I'm running 3 Gear Town and 2 Terraforming. I'm not running 3 Terraforming because in my current deck that I'm running, which is ABCs, I'm running a 3 to 2 for field spell to Terraforming, and I like it. It's wonderful. I see it just often enough that it doesn't become a dead card. And unfortunately, if I run it at 3, it always becomes a dead card no matter what. I draw into it every time when I don't need it. But if I play it like this, it works out fine. The consistency is nice. Pardon me. And I have no issues when drawing into it. Next, I'm running 2 Fortress, simply because, while I like the card, I don't want to see it very often. I see it often enough that I can use it and it works wonderfully, but I don't see it so often that I end up bricking with it. Next, your real VIP for this deck, Ancient Gear Catapult. This card's effect: while you control no other monsters, or no monsters, target one face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon 1 Ancient Gear monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. Hands down, the best card in the deck. You can special summon any of your Ancient Gear monsters off of this card. Plus, if you pop Fortress or Gear Town, that's a second special summon right there. Normally what I'll do is, if I'm going for an OTK, what I'll generally summon out is I'll summon out a Hound and then I'll go for a Wyvern, especially if I don't have Ancient Gears in my hand already, because that means I can go for Wyvern, Wyvern into Box, Box into Gear, then Special Summon Hound off of Gear Town, which means I go for an instant Chaos Giant. Next, I'm running one Foolish Variable Goods. Reason being, Catapult's second effect. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one card you control, destroy it. If you do, special summon one Ancient Gear token. Now, you don't necessarily get as much of a bonus from using this effect as you would its first effect. However, it still knocks out a Gear Town or a Gear Fortress for you, which is fantastic. It works out wonderfully. However, something you have to keep in mind is you can't use both effects in the same turn. You can only use one effect each turn. Next, for my fusion cards, I have a 2 power bond to 1 overload fusion ratio. I would like to bump overload fusion up to 2. However, unfortunately, I don't know what I would take out for it. I don't see it enough, but I'm afraid that at 2 I'll see it too often. So I'm still kind of playing around with the deck and seeing how everything works out. Now, I know I'm going to catch a lot of hate for running MST. But let's face it. Twin Twister, yes, hands down is a better card for destroying back row. I am 100% down with that. However, I'd rather top deck MST with no cards in hand than top deck Twin Twister. Because if I top deck Twin Twister, all I can do is set and hope that my opponent thinks it's a Mirror Force or something like that, and just passes turn so I can draw into something else and then flip Twin Twister. If I top deck MST, I can activate it right then and there, and if I have a Gear Town on the field, I can go off again. I am running one Upstart Goblin in this deck, but I'm considering trading it out for a trade-in, pun not intended. However, the only downside to that is I don't want my Reactor Dragon or my Golem in the graveyard. I'd rather have them in my hand or in my deck so that way I can special summon them out more easily. And while I understand that Reactor Dragon is still a target for something like Ancient Gear Reborn, I don't want to take that risk of not being able to use it. So I'm still deciding whether I want to keep Upstart Goblin or if I want to put trade-in in. My only regret with Upstart Goblin is the 1,000 life points it gives my opponent, because that has really stopped me from OTKing people several times. Finally, my last spell is Limiter Removal, which speaks for itself. You double the attack of all machine-type monsters you control. And yeah, it gets destroyed at the end phase, but I mean, most of your Ancient Gear monsters get effects when they're destroyed, so it works out in the end. As for my traps, I run one Ancient Gear Reborn simply because if you top deck into this card and set it, you have Wyvern in the graveyard, flip, special summon, off. It's wonderful. As for my Solomons, I am running 2 strikes, and I love having 2 strikes in there. However, I am running one Solomon Scolding. Now, for those of you who don't know what this card is, its effect reads, if this is the only set card in your spell and trap zone, when a monster would be summoned, or when a spell, trap, or monster effect would be activated, pay 3,000 life points, negate the summon or activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Now, I'm not going to lie. This has its downsides. It does have to be the only set card in your spell and trap zone. I understand that. That being said, look at how many traps I'm actually running in the deck. It's a risk I'm willing to take. On top of that, I activate Twin Twister or MST, and then flip Scolding, because then Scolding is the only set card in my spell or trap zone. The reason I'm running Scolding is because it's a judgment. It chains to anything. Oh, they want to go for, for example, if I'm playing Cosmos, they want to go for Tin Can, or they want to tag out, flip Scolding, negate, destroy, bam. Their field's empty. I'm still deciding on whether we want to trade it out for a 3rd strike or not, but for right now, I love this card. It's phenomenal. It works out wonderfully. This is for me a card that's well worth having in the deck. Onto the extra deck, I'm running 2 Chaos Giant, 3 Howitzer, and 1 Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem in terms of my fusions. Now, for a brief overview of what each of them do. Chaos Giant's effect is it's unaffected by spell or trap effects. Your opponent's monsters cannot activate their effects during the battle phase, and this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. If this card attacks a defense position monster, it inflicts pierce damage to your opponent. Wonderful card. I love the card. It's wonderful, and at first I thought that having to use 4 Ancient Gear monsters to bring it out was a whole way overuse of resources, but after playing the deck, I realized it's stupidly easy to do, especially with the build that I have set up. It's wonderful, and I hardly ever break. Howitzer's effect is this card is unaffected by card effects. During your main phase, you can inflict 1,000 points of damage to your opponent. Wonderful. Burn right off the bat. You can only use the effect of Ancient Gear Howitzer once per turn. That's fine. If this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Ancient Gear monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. So, this goes to the graveyard. What do you know? You get an instant Ancient Gear Golem. And if you have Hound on the field, and you have an Ancient Gear either in your hand or another one on the field, what do you know? Ancient Gear Golem. Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem comes right on out. This card's effect cannot be special summoned except for fusion summon during battle between this attacking card and a defense position monster whose defense is lower than the attack of this card. Inflict damage difference as battle damage to your opponent. If this card attacks, your opponent cannot activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step. If this card is destroyed, special summon 1 Ancient Gear Golem from your graveyard, ignoring its summoning conditions. It's wonderful. I love this card. I love having it, and especially if I bond it or limited removal, it's fantastic. It's just kill, 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 kill. As for Exceeds, I'm running 1 Phantom Fortress because it's essentially a Trish. You detach 1, banish 1 card. Wonderful. I love it. It's fantastic. I don't think I ever have an intent to trade out this card for anything. Except maybe against Cosmos. Next, I have the Utopia pair. Now, I am considering removing these from my extra deck simply because in all my playtesting, I haven't used them. I just haven't. I haven't seen a need to. If I'm late game, I'm always, boosting up and going for Chaos Giant, or I'm going for Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem. I've never had a real need to pull out Utopia and Utopia Lightning. It just never happened for me. So I'm considering cutting them from the deck, but I still have some more playtesting to do, so I'm not entirely sure where those two are going to fall. Next, I have Anti-Luminescent Knight. Now, I'm back and forth about this card, because while it can be good against something like Blue Eyes is kind of dying now. And, when you have things like Twin Twister, it's really hard to run this card because it can only activate in response to cards that destroy 1 and only 1 card on the field. Which means if Twin Twister activates and they target 2 targets, you're SOL on that front. I've considered trading it out for something, but I don't know what for, and I don't know if I want to. But I'm still playing around with the deck. Next, I have Geargiant X. Now, at this point in time, I only run 1 Geargiant X. I'm considering bumping it up to 2, and I'm considering adding in an heavy armored train Iron Wolf. I haven't decided if I'm going to add that in yet or not, but I believe this would be a good card for pushing for an OTK, especially if you have Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem as well as Iron Wolf on the field. For those who don't know, Iron Wolf's effect is once per turn you can detach 1 Exceed material from this card, then target 1 machine type monster you control this turn. It can attack your opponent directly. Also, other monsters cannot attack. Its second effect is, if this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card, either by battle or card effect, and sent to the graveyard, you can add one level 4 machine type monster from your deck to your hand. It's an overall win-win card, but I haven't decided if I want to add it in with this yet or not. Finally, I do have a Crooked Cook in here, and this card is wonderful, especially if you have something like Fortress or Gear Town down. You go for Crooked Cook, activate its effect, destroy everything else on the field. Now, something that you do need to keep in mind is if you have another monster on the field with Crooked Cook and you have Gear Town down, Gear Town misses its timing because of the additional attack that's gained by Crooked Cook. The last three cards I have in here are Castel, Diamond Dyer, and Abyss Dweller. Diamond Dyer is in there as a stand-in for Tornado Dragon. Once Tornado Dragon is out, I'm going to use it, and I'm going to abuse it, especially with something like Gear Town or Fortress. I will have no need for Diamond Dyer after that. I am considering removing Abyss Dweller and Castel for now, simply because I feel like there are better cards that I could throw in, such as Cowboy for more burn damage, and Gustav Max for even more burn damage. Because Ultimate Ancient Gear Golem is a level 10, and Howitzer is level 10. So if I don't have enough to overrun them with Howitzer and Ancient Gear, which, I mean, I should, but if I don't, for whatever reason, I can go into Gustav Max and burn them for 3,000. It's wonderful. Or 2,000, sorry. It's fantastic. Right now, I'm still playing with the deck, as I said, but I love this setup. So far, this has been wonderful, but I'll see. Eventually, I may make changes due to meta that's coming up, but I think this would, in the end, be a very good deck to play in Link format, especially considering you don't have to play extra deck cards with monsters like Reactor Dragon and Ancient Gear Golem. They're big enough that they can run over just about anything you want them to. In terms of things for the extra deck, I'm looking at adding another Overload Fusion for the extra deck, but I haven't decided. Mainly because, again, it comes down to, I'm afraid that if I have two in there, I'll see it too much, but with one right now, I'm not seeing it often enough as I'd like. Other cards that I'm considering for the extra deck are DD Crow, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rapid, and a possible Kaiju engine. I've seen a lot of deck profiles running Kaijus in the side deck, and while I like the idea of running the Kaijus, I'm not sure that it would be a good mix for Ancient Gears, simply because this deck is very focused on pulling all of your cards out. I do plan on having at least 2 DD Crows in there, simply because of all the decks that are coming up, especially with True Kings. That'll be a wonderful addition. Some interesting choices I've seen people make are Necro Valley, Rivalry of the Warlords, and Skill Drain. I think Necro Valley could be a good card regardless of how much it might hinder you, especially because for things like Cosmos, it prevents them from being able to banish. Rivalry of the Warlords stops decks that run multiple types of monsters, and Skill Drain is just an overall good card for preventing monster effects from going off, especially if you activate it and you sit on it with something like Ancient Gear Golem or Reactor Dragon, or even an Ancient Gear Chaos Giant. You just keep poking over them. And with Ancient Gear Chaos Giant being unaffected by other spells and traps, or by spell and trap effects, Skill Drain doesn't touch it, period. So he still deals pierce damage. It's wonderful. As of right now, that's the deck profile. If I come up with any major updates, I will happily go over this again. However, as I said, we are looking at getting the channel back up and running and having more consistent uploads. Next week, I will be doing a deck profile of Ice Barriers, just for fun. Have a wonderful day, guys.